Hey everyone, this is Gary Kayye, and I want to welcome you to a new and another Launch and Learn. We're going to focus on Screenbeam today and some of the exciting developments in BYOM. We know what BYOD is. We've been dealing with BYOD for the last 10 years, but BYOM is a new concept, bring your own meeting to a room. And there's a lot of new features and functionality that you may not know were added to the Screenbeam product line during the pandemic. So we're coming out of the pandemic. A lot of people are working on building and designing office spaces for the future of people coming back to work, but there's also going to be people working from home, and how to have meeting equity is going to be critical. And integrators, AV integrators specifically, are going to be in charge of solving those problems. A lot of companies are going to say, what do you think we should do? That's going to be a common question, because they're not going to know how to deal with all of this when they have some people working from home, some people working at the office, and people even at the office not wanting to work side by side as closely as they were before. So Screenbeam has an interesting solution, and I want to talk to you about that. I'm going to actually have two gentlemen from Screenbeam join me in just a moment. But first, I want to welcome you. If you're watching us live from on LinkedIn, we're coming to you live on LinkedIn as a little bonus of our Launch and Learn today, because we want to make sure we share this to the AV industry. But we're also in the Launch platform, which is where we do all of our educational and product launch platform items in Launch, and this Launch and Learn is no different. If you're interested in following along and chatting with the guests, or chatting with me, or even putting up comments for me to ask the guests on your behalf, you have a couple options. If you're on LinkedIn, you can do that below in the comments section of LinkedIn, or you can do it on the Launch platform at launch.com. If you're not in Launch right now, you can go over to LAVNCH.com and you can register for today's event. It'll pop right up. You'll see the Live Now button. Click that Live Now button. It'll take you 60 seconds at the most to register, and you'll be live in here. If you're on Launch right now, if you look to your right of the video window here, you will see that this is where you can comment and ask questions of me, ask questions of our two guests. If you are on the Launch platform, below this video window right here, you'll see poll questions. We're going to ask you 3 or 4 poll questions during this 45-minute session today, just to kind of get your feeling for where you are. Like, I know, and this is going to be, listen, what's going to happen here is the very first thing you're going to see is them challenge Barco ClickShare. Barco ClickShare is the leader in the market. They're going to literally pop right on and challenge the ClickShare. They're going to put up a side-by-side chart comparing the prices of their product and features of to the ClickShare, because they know that that is the leading product in the market right now. So this is a gutsy move by Screenbeam. So I want you to pay attention to this. If you are below the polls, you'll see that's where all of you are, and you're able to talk to each other. And we have a representative from Screenbeam on there watching and possibly answer any questions that you have as well. But we're going to try to do as many of those live. So I want to bring on our guests today, because like I said, they're going to make a challenge. Like the industry leader, the 900-pound gorilla in the industry, everyone knows, is Barco. They have about a 90% market share in wireless presentations when it comes to standalone products. In certain markets. Now, you look at the whole market in general, they're probably in the range of 60%. But Mike Erlenberger, you're the chief in charge at Screenbeam. You have a unique product. You started with a unique relationship with Microsoft. Parker Dunbar, I want to thank you for joining me. You're going to actually do a live demo. So first, Mike, I want to turn it over to you, because you've got a challenge to your big competitor out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's throw it down. Gary, thank you very much. This is a great opportunity, and thank you all for tuning in today. We're going to just tell you straight out, we're better than ClickShare. We're better than Mersive. Our solution is less expensive, and the Screenbeam 1100 Plus is available now. We have plenty of stock for immediate shipment. So we want you to hang on. We've got a lot planned for you in this presentation today. We have got a demonstration that is absolutely going to knock your socks off, and that's coming up here in just a few minutes. But let me show you why the Screenbeam solution is better. You know, when you look at the entire industry and you look at the competition and you make that comparison, really Screenbeam is the obvious choice. And we're going to provide you with all the materials and all the proof points that you actually need to vet this out for yourself. But Screenbeam's quality, the performance, the engineering, the user experience, we check all the boxes. And the reason why we check all the boxes is because we work so incredibly closely with all of our customers to make sure that we're really delivering those amazing experiences. Today, we're going to unveil Screenbeam Conference, our awesome BYOM solution that works with Windows, Mac devices. And we're going to show you so much more. I don't want to give away too much because Parker's got a great presentation. But some things that are incredibly unique about the Screenbeam platform is we're the only platform that has true multiple physical networks to enable guest access without compromising security. We support all of the different standards natively. As Gary mentioned before, we work with Microsoft, and I'll talk a little bit more about our very, very special relationship with Microsoft. And we've been inventing, we've been innovating, and we've been packing our platform with amazing features to enable natural user experiences to take place without forcing people into roles that they're uncomfortable with. And finally, we're going to show you how with this type of a solution in any type of a meeting setting, and for that matter, in learning settings as well, we are enabling companies and organizations to have equity across the local and the remote participants. And finally, of course, look at the price point. You know, Screenbeam comes in at an incredibly low price point, much lower than that of the competition. And we'll tell you why we're at this price point when we get to the end of the presentation as well. But here's what I really want to share with you is that if you look at video conferencing and the total cost of ownership, you know, there's a lot to consider. You know, obviously, we've got to get through the qualifications. We've got to have the best performance. We've got to deliver the best flexibility. It's got to be the most agile, reliable, and the usability pieces have got to be there before you even start to consider the price point. But with that all said, and that all packed into Screenbeam, why would you pay more for less? Screenbeam 1100 Plus comes with Screenbeam Conference and Screenbeam Management at no additional cost. And I really want to emphasize that, no additional cost. If you compare us to Barco ClickShare, we're 1/3 of the cost, total cost of ownership. 1/3 of the cost of the Barco ClickShare for total cost of ownership when it comes to conferencing. Compare us to the Immersive Solstice, we're half the cost. Let us deliver for you. So, you know, we've all been looking at stats. You know, Gary, I know you've been talking about this a lot during the pandemic. And we look at these data points that come in from these trusted sources, PricewaterhouseCoopers. You know, we all know that hybrid meeting is absolutely what's happening, hybrid work. The new normal is people work from home, people work from the office, and we've got to really create this equity situation. And Gary, you were talking about that just in the intro. And, you know, when we study that and think about that, you know, we ask ourselves, what does that really mean? And it means that when people are in the office and people are remote, they both have the same representation, and they're both able to access the content in the room, and not just the audio, video content, not just the shared content, okay, but also other content that's happening in the room, like on whiteboards and in other areas. And Screenbeam really, really has worked hard to create a solution that can be deployed either as a turnkey solution, okay, or can be integrated into existing room solutions or into new room designs. Right now, as companies are preparing to come back, they're racing to deploy Screenbeam and Screenbeam Conference. This is the new normal, and most meetings are going to be just like this. They're going to be online. We're going to have people that are in the office. You can see Parker Dunbar. He's out in our Tampa office today. I'm actually working from home today. We have other participants. I'm sure many of you are in your offices or in home. And if this was an actual meeting, we'd all be wanting to participate and needing to be participants. Certainly, we don't want anybody to be a second-class citizen in a meeting because they're on the remote side of things. Screenbeam Conference, and we're going to show you today, eliminates the gap between the in-person and remote participants, making meetings and companies more productive. Now, I'm really excited. We're going to absolutely knock your socks off. I'd like to introduce to you Parker Dunbar for our live demonstration. Parker?
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. And thanks, Gary and the team. So I'm here to show you Screenbeam Conference, the Screenbeam 1100 Plus, and a lot of other great features. I'm going to do my best to put some pauses in here so that people can ask some questions, or so that we can have this really as a conversation. But let me show you the device we're talking about today. So this is the Screenbeam 1100 Plus. We designed this based on the feedback we were getting from our customers, and these customers are coming to us across all different verticals: enterprise, higher ed, healthcare, EDU, you name it. And so we've got a couple different ports on the back here. I know everybody likes that ports connectivity view. So we've got power, we've got three USB ports, one Ethernet port. We have an HDMI output, and that supports up to 4K for wireless display. We have an HDMI input as well, and we've actually got an HDMI auto switch built into the Screenbeam that's got some customizability that you've got control over. And we've also got that legacy audio output. So if you have customers that have systems that run on that audio output, they're still going to be able to make use of that. So what I have here in my lab is sort of our conference room experience. We've got a 65-inch interactive touch display here, and I've got a couple of Screenbeams here because I'm going to show you some different features and different setups of ways you could use the Screenbeam. And then finally, I've got this Poly Studio. We call this an all-in-one video bar. It's a camera, it's a microphone, it's speakers, all in one device. So these are the kind of technologies that are getting deployed into meeting rooms and conference rooms so that we aren't all having to huddle around one person's laptop when there are multiple people in an office, but we've also got remote participants. And the important thing to know and understand about Screenbeam Conference is it's not just limited to this Poly Studio or some particular brand partnership. We're able to use a variety of different webcam devices and audio sources with the Screenbeam. So that's just connected via USB. I've got my Screenbeam connected to this display via HDMI. So on a ready screen, we've got our customizable device name. This allows users, or IT administrators, I should say, to easily name the Screenbeam so that when somebody goes to connect to a device, they see some really recognizable friendly text. We've got our connection instruction information. So depending on which features of the Screenbeam you turn on or off, you're going to see this change in connection information. So if you turn off AirPlay, you're going to see the AirPlay information go away. And in fact, what a lot of our customers like to do, they'll hide this menu entirely. They'll create their own custom background. You can upload whatever image you like. And then they'll put their own sort of branded connection information in there. They'll put their IT contact information or whatever kind of room resources they want people to know. So you can customize that experience quite a bit. But let me get into
Hey, Mike, welcome to 2021, huh?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This is what happens. This is actually a live demo. This is not a fake live demo. So I'm hoping that Parker realizes that he got disconnected. I don't know if his network went out or something, but I'd love for him to come back on. He was doing a really good job, and that's really framed up well to demo your product. So I'm watching that screen down there in the bottom right-hand corner to see if he comes back on. There's a couple of questions that came in. Sean Ryan asked the question, why were you limiting this to the education market originally when the corporate market has so much opportunities here? Like, why is this the time you're entering in the corporate market? And I don't know that even Sean realized that that's the whole point of this session today is to reintroduce you into the corporate market, because I don't think you weren't necessarily targeting the corporate market, but you just had more traction in the education market. And I think part of it was that relationship you have with Microsoft. So talk about that for just a second while we get Parker back up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's an excellent question. Thank you for following Screenbeam. We actually know there's a big difference in, solutions that are going into education and going into corporate. We were in corporate for a while, but we really didn't have what we felt was the ultimate solution. And we had a number of very big multinational customers that we were working with. And that actually helped us design the portfolio that started with the 1100 and now the 1100 plus. So when we come into market, we want to make sure that we're really checking all the boxes, that we're not trying to, put a square peg into a round hole. And education is a market that we've been very, very successful in globally. We have shipped a lot of product there, but we've been in the corporate market now officially since the middle of 19, and then of course COVID happened, We continue to go, and you'll see later on in this presentation, we'll actually share with you some of the marquee customers we have globally that are deploying Screenbeam.
Yeah, and I'm curious as to why. I noticed in your chart that your price is around $1,000, and you're taking a pretty aggressive stance, saying, "Look, we're not just $1,000, but we have all the features that Barco has in the first 2 levels of the ClickShare conference, and all but one, I think, of the features in their largest ClickShare conference unit, and you're $999. Why? Like, how are you able to be $999, and why this sort of aggressive move towards this? Obviously, from a marketing standpoint, it makes sense because Barco's the leader in the market. But I'm just curious, like, how are you able to do it for $999? Because it makes, just as a casual observer, it makes me a little bit suspicious. Because when somebody says, well, ours is better and cheaper, the comeback is always, well, really, is it?
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, we have a lot of customer testimonials, and one of the follow-ups to this live webinar, that was a good one, webinar, is going to be a link to a video that one of our partners put together just recently, where they're talking about the 1100 plus and being the best solution in the market. So yes, of course, we're a brand. We're going to talk about our solutions, but we feel very, very comfortable talking about why our solution is the best. And our strategy is very simple. We look at the market in its entirety. We've evaluated what the total addressable market is globally, and we've set a goal to become the market share leader in this category. And what our customers are doing, and I think it's different than what our competitors' customers are doing, is they're taking Screenbeam and they're deploying it and standardizing on it across their entire organization. So it's one thing when you have a customer that might be deploying 20, 50, 100, depending on the size of the customer, you can kind of figure out the ratio versus a customer that's deploying this technology in every single room. And as you start to do that, and as you get into hundreds of rooms, and we have customers that are doing thousands of rooms, and we have a handful of customers that have done just about 10,000 rooms in their organization, price starts to make a difference. Yeah. And that's why we're positioned the way we are.
All right, so there's some, one of the questions is, can you provide some information on the interactive touchscreens you've tested with the Screenbeam for Microsoft inking, specifically the two-way touch and inking support for Microsoft Teams? That's from Brandon Giselle. And I think in general, all the touchscreen systems.
Yeah. No, it's we've definitely tested with a lot of screens. We have partnerships with display OEMs. Actually, that's one of the big benefits of being this partner with Microsoft, is that they have these great relationships with the display companies. They're very concerned about driving collaboration. Windows has a collaboration strategy. We worked with Microsoft in our partnership to invent this technology called UIBC. And what UIBC does is it allows touchscreens to communicate with laptops over the wireless display connection. But the big challenge that you run into is that you have latency. You just can't get past the laws of physics that, you got the touch screen, which is sending a signal to the Screenbeam, which is sending a signal to the notebook or the presenter's device, which is then rendering the ink in Microsoft in this particular case, which is then sending it back to the Screenbeam and then displaying it on the board. So that whole round trip is going to create some latency. And what's going to happen is that you're going to see a little delay. So as you're drawing or writing, you're going to see a little bit of a gap. And generally, depending on the speed of the ink going on there, it could be, and the size of the display, you could actually be missing a couple of inches of ink. And so what we did at Screenbeam is we actually invented a technology. It's patent pending technology called ghost inking. And with ghost inking, we absolutely eliminate the latency completely by actually having our own inking technology on our platform. And basically what you'll see is that there will be an ink trail. And then as soon as the wet ink or the dry ink comes back from the source, it just covers it right up. And the benefit is that the eye-hand communication is really, or coordination is really there. You can write, you can annotate, it's very easy. You can draw and connect lines together. And in other situations, you just can't do it because the latency just kind of breaks that human experience.
Yeah, and by the way, Parker is back. Parker, what happened?
Hey, everyone. I don't know what happened. I was rolling with it. I was talking to Allison on Screenbeam Conference, and Allison told me, hey, you're not in the green room anymore. Why don't you drop and rejoin? So
Did your internet freeze up, or what happened? Do you have any idea?
No, I could still see you guys. I thought I was just chugging along. I think maybe the broadcast cast screen froze, but so I'm back. I'm not going to change.
Well, we were just answering customer questions, and one of the questions that came in from also Brandon asked again, can you let us know what the HDMI input for the Screenbeam Conference is used for? I'm assuming it provides it as a almost like a switcher, so you have a hardwired input. And in fact, the Microsoft Teams spec requires it, Brandon. In case you were wondering, to be Teams certified, you have to have an external secondary HDMI input. But it makes the Screenbeam app act as a 2-input switcher, one wireless input and one wired input. But Parker, I want to send it back to you and let you continue your demo. And you were at the point where you were, I don't know if you know where you were exactly. Do you know where you were?
I was going to say, I was just about to call Allison and turn something on, I think.
You were about, I'd say 30 seconds away from that. So start there and we'll keep on going.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, everybody. So I'll talk more to that inking and touch side, that HDMI input. That was a feature that we built in on the hardware platform when the 1100 Plus was first introduced. It does allow you to ingest content, and then you can switch between wired and wireless, or you can assign that the wired is the priority and it always stays up. So if you had some other in-room hardware, you could use that. Right now, that HDMI input does not talk to the conference side of things. The conference is all done purely wirelessly. But let me come back to how we would join a meeting. So in Teams, I've got a meeting here, and I'm just going to tap join. And this is a second PC. I'm not in the webinar on this PC, so hopefully joining shouldn't make me drop or anything like that. And I'm going to make sure I've got my devices selected. I've got those in-room pieces of equipment, that Poly Studio that you see zooming in behind me. So when I join this meeting, I'm going to see Allison. She's my remote participant in this meeting. Hey, Allison, can you hear me all right?
I can, Parker.
Okay, awesome. And webinar participants, I think unfortunately you might not be able to hear Allison as well as before. I don't want to mess with any audio settings. So okay, good. You guys can see her. So Allison's there. We're in this meeting right now. I am in duplicate mode. So whatever's here on this laptop that I'm driving the meeting with, that's what everybody in the meeting sees. But because of our co-engineering partnership with Microsoft, and because this is a native technology, I can just hit the Windows key and the letter P. I can switch from duplicate screen mode to extended screen mode. And now I can take that meeting with Allison. I can drag it over to this other screen. And now I can be responding to a Teams message. I can be taking notes on the meeting. I can be getting something queued up. And everybody in the room gets to see Allison and what we're still working on. So we've got a view. And I'll show you just on another laptop. I know, try to follow here. So this laptop is also joined to that meeting as if it was another remote participant. So that remote participant sees Allison and it sees me on that in-room camera as well. So we all can see each other. We can have that shared experience where everybody's able to look at one another, and you can see there Allison is. She's moving smoothly. We're not having horrible echo problems. We're not having to all crowd around one person's laptop to be able to have that shared front of room experience. And because of that wireless syncing and touch support in Windows 10, I can come right up here in Teams. If I want to share a PowerPoint, we can come in here and I can pull up a PowerPoint. I can still see Allison. She can still see me. What's going on? We're just bringing up our presentation here. And we can start talking about this, and we can be inking and annotating. So I can come in here on my presentation. And in fact, I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so that you guys can see this better. But I can come into that screen, and I can actually be annotating on this PowerPoint. And those annotations, Allison can see them as a remote participant. They're happening in my PowerPoint through O365. So this ink is not an overlay layer. It's not something separate. It's not something that we have to worry about getting lost or distributing after the meeting. And we can come in. We've got that ghost inking playing that little halo for us. And I'll show you a better view of that in just a minute here. But we're able to come in and make those meaningful inking experiences wirelessly. And Allison is our remote attendee, and we'll see that remote attendee view again for just a second here. Our remote attendee sees what's going on in the room, sees the camera feed view of everybody, and is able to be engaged in that meeting as things are happening, as we're making changes, and it's very dynamic. Let me set that down. I'll go ahead and stop presenting my PowerPoint. And of course, because this is embedded inking, it's going to let everybody know that we're stopping the session, but those annotations are going to be saved within O365. Allison, I'm going to minimize you for a minute here so I can talk about a couple other inking and touch features for just a second.
Parker.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions that came in while you were doing that. I want to see if you can answer them real quick. For Teams, as a Teams room solution, we have a use case that came up from Jason Tree where he's saying where attendees won't have their own Teams client when joining a meeting. Is it Teams certified?
So the architecture of Screenbeam Conference is a little bit different than the architecture of a Teams room. So a Teams room is a hardware appliance that just joins Teams meetings. Screenbeam Conference, you can think of as a connector. It's bridging the gap between this in-room peripheral and whatever device your user is coming in with. So whether they want to join a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting or WebEx or any platform, they can join those meetings completely wirelessly from their own device, unlike a Teams room or a Teams room certified appliance where the device itself would be joining the meeting. So it's a different architectural approach.
So the theory is that you would use your regular app, like your Zoom app, your Teams app, and you would launch the app like you normally would. Does it support two displays, dual screen, so that you can have two displays up?
So it only has... Yeah, that's a great question. It only has one display output. Now you could feed that and split it out and have the same content on two separate external displays.
Means to have the local display and the remote display separately in that application. So that's what you need to build in the 1200 plus, I guess.
Exactly.
Tom is asking
more screens.
Thomas Fats, I might mess up this name. Pavitsko. Sorry, Thomas, I didn't say that right. Do you require an app to be downloaded to your device before using Screenbeam? So can you run it completely without an app? Is it just running just like AirPlay does, or how do you get to run?
So if all you want to do is share content from a device to an in-room display, you can do that all without any applications. You can do that all native on any device, Windows device, Apple device, Android device. If you want to use this conference where you can connect to that in-room piece of equipment, that requires the software. And the reason for that is there's simply no native data path for that information to travel on.
And so that software download, how quick is it? How does it work? I mean, and is it secure? All those kind of things. Does it disconnect when you're in the meeting? All those kinds of things with regard to security.
Absolutely. Those are great questions. So it's a very small download. You can go to screenbeam.com/getconference, and that's where you would go if you wanted to download the application. One of the things architecturally that's different from other solutions out there, like what ClickShare is doing and what Mersive is doing, is that we still use the native path for wireless display. So the camera data
if you're going
is
AirPlay,
Conference.
You're still using AirPlay.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the reason why that's important is because if you're still using the native wireless display technology, it's less resource intensive on the system. So we're not going to have the same level of CPU, RAM requirements that you'll see on those other solutions. We're not going to run up processor and memory as much because of this difference in the fundamental architecture of how it works.
Okay, David Lopez says, great demo, BYOM contactless. Wow, great demo. Brandon Giselle again asks a second question. Do you have a utility or a way to determine if Screenbeam will operate well on a wireless connection or should be migrated over to a wire network? So in other words, you're able to sort of like know the bandwidth issues that you might run into, how many frames per second, the typical wireless stuff that I'm even having the problems with today.
Yeah, so we definitely recommend that Screenbeam is installed with Ethernet if you're going to use Conference. You can use it with a wireless backhaul. You can even use it over a peer-to-peer connection between the Screenbeam and the client device for Windows. Apple doesn't have that same peer-to-peer architecture. But that would be something that as a network admin, you'd be looking at ahead of time before deploying it for end users to use.
Okay, one thing that we need to do is definitely show the app joining a conference, but I'm going to let you get back to your demo. I wanted to interrupt you with those questions.
Sure. Yeah, no, those were great questions. So I know we talked a little bit about inking earlier, and I just want to take another moment to talk about inking in a little bit more detail. I'm going to leave this Teams meeting that I'm in here, and we're going to switch back to that duplicate mode. And I'm going to zoom the camera in so that everybody can get that much better a view of what's going on. So if you have a customer, or if you as an organization have made an investment in an interactive touch display, then obviously if you're going to switch from having users wired connecting to that display to users connecting wirelessly, you don't want to be losing features of this display, because this was probably a pretty big investment. So I'm just in Microsoft Whiteboard as an example, but inking in touch is pervasive across the Microsoft OS. So I can use one finger on the display, and you can see I can navigate around, but I can also use multi-finger gestures. So I can take 2 fingers and I can do a pinch to zoom in and out. I can, if my display supports it, use a pen. So I can come in here and we can recognize, oh, I got to make sure I pick a pen and not an eraser. And I'll pick a nice fat pen. I think purple's a good color. I can come in here and I can start annotating right on the display. You might be able to see that ghost inking trail. That's that little gray line that comes as soon as I start writing that gives me that feedback so that I can see what I'm doing, where I'm going. It allows me to write in more of a straight line, in as much as my chicken scratch can be interpreted as a straight line. And you can also do a palm erase gesture. So you can just take a flat hand and erase any of that inking. So those touch features that this display supports, you're still going to be able to use all of those different types of touch in Windows natively when you're using the Screenbeam. And it's not just limited to Whiteboard or some particular app. We can come into PowerPoint and we can be in a meeting and we can be annotating directly on, let me see, go to my next slide. We could be annotating directly on the display. So we can decide that, yeah, we want to keep that slide, we want to keep that piece, we want to keep that piece, but maybe we're going to cut these just from a timing perspective. So you've got the ability to have these more substantive edits. We can come in and we can get really close and we can make those changes, not just drawing basic shapes on top of an overlay that we then have to distribute to our meeting participants. So that's a big difference from other solutions out there. It's a big value that you're getting when you use Screenbeam as your wireless display solution.
All right, so Parker, I've got some other questions to ask you here. The first question that comes to mind is, so there's a product out there called the Flex from Newline, and they've developed an app that allows you to do two-way touch with their device on a Mac. Does your app allow you to add two-way touch on a Mac, or have you thought about adding that as a feature? And then that really kind of leads into Andre Hospin's question, which is there a version of the app specifically for the Mac OS?
Great questions. And at this point, Screenbeam Conference for macOS is available. It's in beta, so you go to screenbeam.com/getconference. You can choose if you want to download the Windows or macOS version. That macOS version does not have two-way touch, but I agree that that would be a great thing to have. And one of the reasons why we weren't looking at that type of solution in the past is because for a long time, we wanted to make sure that we were making wireless display as accessible as it could be to end users. And what that meant was, until there was really a prevailing need for why we needed to put software on an end user system, we avoided putting anything there. Oh, yes. Yep. So that was, that's the impetus there. There is software for Mac OS, and I can even come in here and show you what it looks like.
Hey,
so that you can see.
I know that we, we had a little technical issue in the beginning of the demo, but, we didn't actually demo the Screenbeam Conference software. So if we can back it up, that's going to be so important, because really this is what's going to knock everybody's socks off. And it's very important for people to see. So can we go back and...
So while he's setting that up, Mike, I'm going to ask you a question. He's going to set that up.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you a question. In the room that Parker's in, is the webcam and mic connected to the 1100 plus via the USB ports on the Screenbeam? That's how it's connected. So instead of plugging it into a room PC, you're plugging it directly into the Screenbeam. Right.
Yeah, there's no room PC at all in this application. So, basically with Screenbeam Conference with BYOM, Screenbeam is all the I/O. It does all the processing. So you bring up bring a video bar in, you bring whatever kind of audio system in you need. It connects via USB. We have multiple USB ports on the back of the Screenbeam device. And then when you connect with Screenbeam Conference, your device, your MacBook or your Windows laptop will automatically see that those cameras are available. And then you just choose whatever web conferencing tool you like. So if it's Teams or Zoom or anything else, you just run that on your laptop the way you normally would in your workstation at work or maybe at your house. But now you're getting the room view and the room audio as a big benefit. And of course, the big display in the room as well.
Yeah, and that's exactly, by the way, Jared, that's exactly the way that the ClickShare conference works as well. So they're very similar in the way they operate. So I'm going to go back to Parker. I'm going to see if we can put Parker on full screen before we ask.
All right. I think you guys are all seeing me full screen. So here is the Screenbeam Conference app in Windows 10. I'll show you it looks awful similar on a Mac OS device. See that consistency of design there? So we've got only two choices for ourselves as an end user. We wanted to intentionally keep this very simple from a UI perspective. We can project only if we're just using the display in the room, or we can choose project in conference if we want to use that video bar that's here in this room. So once I tap project in conference, it automatically opens the connect menu in Windows, and I pick my device based on the name. Then I'm going to type in that PIN code, and that's an important part of the process too. As someone who is coming in and sharing, if I have content that I want to make sure I don't accidentally send to the display in the other room, I can be using Screenbeam Conference, which is going to make sure that every time I come in here to connect, I'm entering that PIN. That's a configurable setting, because in some meeting spaces, you're always going to want to have that PIN prompted, but maybe you have huddle rooms or other spaces where people are going to drop in and drop out. In those spaces, you can turn the PIN on connection off. So once that connection process went through, you saw I did, let's see, three things. I tapped project in conference, picked my Screenbeam, entered the PIN, and now we're good. We're getting this little tutorial image. Right now it's showing Teams, but I could go to Zoom or Google Meets or GoToMeeting or WebEx. We've just embedded those in there to help people out. It lets people know where to go to make sure you've got the right video and audio devices set. But now that I'm connected and I want to launch a Teams meeting, all I do is open Teams, tap to join my meeting. And you can see here, I've got the digital output, the in-room microphone, and the in-room camera. So those devices, those are the Screenbeam devices that are getting us there. You can even see the little preview of the camera zooming in on me from behind earlier. And so now if I say join now, I'm in this Teams meeting. I think it's just me at the moment.
That's I lower your laptop just a little bit because I want to, because what's interesting here is the real-time nature of what you're doing wirelessly. So that's really good. That's a good demo.
Yeah, so this is the perspective that somebody who's sitting here in the room is going to have. Right. And what I'll do on my MacBook here is I'll come join so you can see what a remote participant sees. Yeah. So and as a remote
you have
user,
a remote user on Mac, you have the in-room user on Windows, and then you have the in-room PC device display. Connected to the Screenbeam 1100 Plus. So go ahead. Yeah.
All right, perfect. So here I am on my remote user. This is my work from home, work from anywhere. I'm going to join. I'm going to join without audio just so that it doesn't disrupt everyone. Oh, yeah. Yep. Perfect. So, okay. I'm going to turn that camera on just so you can see the camera that we're looking at here.
Right.
And I'm going to join. It's going to get a little meta here. As a remote participant, you see the in-room user. So that's me. I'm looking at the Poly Studio. They're hearing me through the microphone on the Poly Studio. One of the things that Poly Studio can do, if I'm walking around the room, it will track me as I move around. That functionality will continue while you're using Screenbeam Conference. So you'll still be able to have that, or it'll even split screen 2 speakers and swap back and or show both of them in the room at once.
So you're passing all the AI functionality through the Screenbeam Conference.
Yeah, so
the cameras and mics. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So any of the functionality we can pass through, we definitely want to pass through because we want to make sure, again, that you're getting all of those features that you're paying for on whatever device you're using.
Okay, this is a good demo. I want to bring Mike back on. I got a couple other questions I want to ask you. One of the questions that came up was from John Mercer. Specifically around Teams. He said he has an example as an appless, for example, as an appless alternative to Crestron Air Media.
When you integrate with a Teams room?
Yes, Teams room, yep.
Well, I'm not sure exactly, but
I was going to say, Mike, I know exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is definitely a case that we've run into with customers. So if you have a Teams room appliance that has HDMI ingest and you just plug something in that's always on, then that Teams room is always going to think that you're trying to send through some HDMI content. We can turn off our HDMI output when we're not in a wireless display session, and that will let the Teams room go back to its default behavior as if nothing is plugged in. And then as soon as somebody does Windows Key K or does AirPlay or does Google Cast, we wake our HDMI output back up. That looks like a hot plug to the MTR.
Oh, so it's actually a feature, not a fault. I think what I was reading this is John sees this as a fault because you're turning that HDMI source off. But in fact, what you're saying, it's a feature so that the Teams room can act in its normal rest state, default state of being a digital signage display with instructions on the screen, right?
Yep,
Did I get that
absolutely
right?
Okay.
So John, if I did not ask that question properly, please repost it. Would it be possible to meaningfully use the Screenbeam with two TVs? Also, can it take input from a Scarlett interface via USB? That's Brandon Giselle. So we answered the two outputs question already. What's a Scarlett interface? Am I missing something there?
I'm not familiar with the Scarlett interface. I've got something to Google after this call.
Yeah, Brandon,
figure out if that's something I need to follow up on.
If I said something wrong, Brandon, let me know. He asked another question right afterwards. If you use the Screenbeam Conference application, will it automatically pick the Screenbeam inputs for the camera, mic, and speaker? Can you set that as a default? Like when you open up, I mean, I guess one way to set as a default is if you have your computer set default that way. But is it possible to set that as a default?
So we do our best job to make those devices get picked when you are connected and make those devices go away when you are not connected. But believe it or not, there is not a super granular way that you can just command certain devices to change.
Except on a Mac.
Except
on a Mac. In system preferences, you can force those default settings. So Brandon, you can switch to the Mac and you will have that problem solved. But in the Windows world, he is correct that it is kind of a free-for-all with regards to those settings. Yep. But yeah, I get what you're saying, Parker.
But that was something we actually had as feedback when we initially released our Windows 10 beta, as people said, hey, it's kind of frustrating for my users to have to select this device and then deselect this device when they want to go to their next meeting. Right. So we made some actually pretty substantial engineering changes under the hood. We kept the user experience the same to allow us to get pretty close to making sure that we're selecting the right devices for the user. It's also why we put the tutorial graphics in there.
There's another idea that I have. I mean, one thing you can do is use geolocation inside of a facility and say that the room is 17 feet deep. And when you leave the room, it disconnects physically that way using that functionality. And we already have that being used for phones, beacon technology. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. I just throw out a suggestion. Focusrite Scarlett is a USB audio I/O. It should work since it's just a USB device. So Focusrite Scarlett. So basically, it's allowing you to take any USB device into or converting anything into a USB device, and it's from a company called Focusrite. Focusrite makes a lot of broadcast stuff. So you probably should look that up for sure, Patrick.
Definitely.
To know, Parker, you're going to need to look that up, and we'll connect you with Patrick, because Patrick, logically, you're right. It should work because it's just a USB device. And the answer to the question is, from my understanding, if it's USB 2 or 3 and it's got bidirectional communications, you're able to handshake it and know what it is, as long as they've set it up properly.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And we're our lab is vastly filling up with every kind of camera that we can think of and audio peripheral, because we want to make sure, naturally you don't have the same set of hardware in every room. So we want to be as cross-compatible as possible.
Well, I'll tell you, Parker, you did a great demo. And I wish it would not have been chopped up because of the network issues. But the two parts together make a great demo. I think you did a really good job. It's hard to do that in real time. Greg Sellers asked the question, what are the minimum PC requirements for conferencing? Basically, I think the answer to that is whatever Teams, Zoom, Pexip, whatever app you're using Meets requires. I don't think there's a minimum processing specification. Is there, Mike?
Yeah, there is. We do post on our website recommended configurations because we are using some processor, but unlike other solutions out there that are completely dependent on the processor, we've significantly reduced the the actual dependency and the size of the processor that's required.
So that's on your website. If we could get Allison to send that over to our production team, we'll post that while we're on live if that comes in. Parker, were you going to say something else there?
Oh, I was going to say, I've got other cool things to show you on demo if people don't have questions.
We're going to go back to you. We're going back to you full screen. Go for it.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So I'm going to change gears a little bit. I'm going to stop talking about conference for just a minute. I know conference is big. I want to share a quick story with you. So just the other week, I was at a partner's office. It was in downtown Dallas, 53rd floor of the Bank of America Plaza. It's a beautiful office, beautiful building. I walk in and they've got digital signage displays all over their conference rooms, their offices. You come in, it says, "Welcome, Parker Dunbar." I felt very special. And in other areas, they had it for teams. So different teams that were around, they had metrics that they were working on. They had projects that they were working on. So there were probably 8 or 9 displays hung around this office with all of this signage content that was playing. And it was very cool. It was very interactive as somebody who was coming in. But one of the things that you couldn't do was you couldn't share anything to those screens. They're already hanging up there on the wall. They're already spaced around. And as we think about that hybrid work environment and the return to work, and one of the things Gary said earlier is maybe people are going to come to meetings, they're not going to want to be so close together. Well, if we can take those displays that we've already hung up on the walls, spaced apart all around, and we can use them for a stand-up meeting, now we've got the ability to have more meeting spaces without necessarily having huge infrastructure spend. And so what we've done with the Screenbeam, and I'm just going to switch to my other Screenbeam here, is that we've actually built in a digital signage player. So you can take content that you've created on another platform and you can pipe that into the Screenbeam. So right now, you're just seeing the generic ready to connect screen with the same information that you saw before. But what I can do is I can push some signage content to that screen. I'm actually using our remote management tool. So once I get the signage content configured, I'll show you what that tool looks like so that you can know what you're getting into in terms of device management. But I've got my Screenbeam selected. I come in here. I want to turn digital signage on. I've just got a URL that I'm going to point to, and I'm going to say proceed. So I can see my Screenbeams here. If they were across different sites globally, I could see all of them. I can organize them geographically. I can assign administrators at only certain sites. So I can say Mike's only got control of devices in California. Very, very flexible. I've got a scheduler. I've got a lot of other kind of core tools for remote management. But now what you'll see is that we've taken about 60% of the screen real estate and we've turned it into that signage. So it can say, Parker, welcome. It can show you what your metrics are for your sales team, but we can also reserve some space so that people can see the instructions for getting connected if they're less familiar with wireless display. And in our latest firmware, we give people the ability to say, you know what? People don't need those instructions. I want to change. I want to have that content, that signage, taking up 100% of the display. So now you'll see in just a minute, it's going to switch. We're going to have content that is full screen on our display. So we're using that signage player that's built in at no additional cost. You're just piping your signage content to the Screenbeam as an endpoint instead of whatever other endpoint you already have. And then if somebody wants to have a quick meeting, all they have to do is Windows key K, or go to AirPlay or go to Google Cast, and they can connect to this screen and start sharing. So let me come in and do that real quick. And I'm going to show you another cool feature we have. This is a feature that's only going to work right now if you're not using Screenbeam Conference. So for those huddle spaces that aren't going to be hybrid meeting spaces, we support a technology that we call multi-view mode. And it allows you to connect with different devices. It can be any mix of operating systems. You can even mix in the HDMI input into that group of devices. So now I'm up with my Windows device. I'm going to come in with my iPad here as well. I'm going to swipe in. I'm going to screen mirroring on my iPad. I'm going to pick the Screenbeam from the list of devices. And then you can configure it to ask for a PIN. I've actually configured my Screenbeam not to ask for a PIN when I'm connected. But now I've got my iPad there in addition to my Windows device. And you see we'll follow that rotation there. come in with my MacBook too, just to get another person in play. And what this technology allows you to do is be very collaborative with a display. So people can come in an app-free experience, share multiple sets of content, and we're just handling all of that dynamic resizing to make sure that we can see and fit everybody here on that screen. Just one of the other features that we support on the Screenbeam as a configuration option. Let's see. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, because a lot of times I'm in meetings with people who are looking at wireless display solutions. They're thinking about what they want their conference rooms of the future to look like. And one of the things they want to do is they know they want to support mobile devices. They know they want somebody to be able to come in with an iPad or with their phone and be able to connect to the screen. That's just sort of a project requirement that they're having to work with. But they don't really know why. They don't really see the use case. Why would somebody come into a meeting with just an iPad? This is where native technology comes into play. When you're able to leverage all the investments that Microsoft and Apple and Google have made in their hardware, their apps, and their OS, we can be having the PowerPoint app for iOS. We can open up a presentation that we created on another device. So on our workstation, I created this presentation. Now I can go into slideshow mode. So you can see my slides up there full screen. I've got my presenter view. I can sneak around here if I want to jump around from slide to slide. I don't just have to go in order. And again, with those native approaches, you've got native inking built into PowerPoint for iOS. So I can come in and annotate on the iPad, and I can have those annotations show up right there on my display in real time. And those, again, they're embedded. It's pervasive across Office 365. So when I want to end this presentation, I'm going to get asked if I want to keep or discard that inking and annotation, that feedback and information.
Is that a native feature of PowerPoint, or is that a native feature of the iOS AirPlay functionality of an iPad, iPhone? Because I did not know that you could have the slide viewer and the slide open at the same time. Is that a PowerPoint thing, or is that a iOS thing?
That is a PowerPoint for iOS thing. So this is not.
They don't even allow you to
this
do
is
that on the
free
PC.
plug.
Why would they not let you do that on the PC? That's crazy.
Yeah, your free plug. This is not even just a Screenbeam thing, though it is very cool. But that's what we're talking about. I have a colleague who used to work in a classroom. She was a teacher. She had an iPad. However, she didn't have an Apple TV. She didn't have a Screenbeam. So if she wanted to share what was on her iPad to the touchscreen display that she had in her room, she had to take the iPad, stick it under her document camera, switch on the input switcher to the document camera, turn the lights off on the document camera, turn the brightness up on the iPad. How old is this
person? This is like the old way of presenting in a classroom. By the way, that's the application for iOS devices. My students, we work on projects in classrooms all the time, and I'll say, throw up what you just did on the screen, and that's the application. We do it all the time. So there is an application for that kind of stuff. Hey, Parker, we only have a few minutes left, and I got a bunch of questions for you. Can I like rapid fire and bring Mike back on?
Rapid fire away.
Questions for you. We only have a few more minutes here, and I want to make sure we get those answered. I'm glad that we answered. I think we answered John Mercer's question. Parker, you nailed it. He said, "What is the limit? What is the limit to the number of Screenbeam devices that you can have on the same LAN/subnet? At what point do you start seeing wireless interference?"
Mike, do you want to take that one, or you want me to speak to that?
Well, I guess that's a technical question, Parker. Why don't you give it a shot?
All right, I'm happy to speak to that. So Screenbeam has a lot of features on the Windows side that allow you to have granular control that you don't have with other devices. You can set the channel that each Screenbeam uses within the 5 gigahertz spectrum, so you can avoid interference between Screenbeams that are adjacent to one another, and you can avoid interference between Screenbeams and your infrastructure network. We can support peer-to-peer wireless display, where the laptop talks directly to the Screenbeam. And that's what we do in our office in California, where there's probably 100 devices in one open room, and we're still able to get connected and share. Apple devices and Google are a little bit different, but you could still put quite a few devices. The thing you run into, and we're talking in the order of maybe 25 devices before it starts becoming a little bit tedious to scroll through discovery. But there are also tools that will help you limit the scope of that discovery.
We do that. That's
out
what
there.
we do. We limit it at UNC, and when you're in a classroom, you only see the classroom you're in, the ones next to it. What are the brand specs? Is there a place on your website where we can see third-party solutions that are compatible from touchscreen displays to sound bars to cameras with the Screenbeam? And I think the answer is, as long as it's it's proper USB protocol communications across, then you're going to be okay with anything. But are you doing testing and verification, Parker?
Yeah, so on our website, on our support page, so support.screenbeam.com, we've got a list of touchscreens that we've tested or that our partners have tested and told us work. And in general, any touchscreen that's an HID device should work. We've also got a list of supported conference peripherals for Screenbeam Conference on our website as well.
All right,
and we can drop the links to that afterwards.
Phil Soretti asked the question, does the conference also allow for multiple presenters, like the 2x2 configuration in the non-conference version? And the answer is yes. I mean, you have it in both versions where you're just doing wireless, throwing up multiple sources, basically. And you have a 2x2 configuration as well, right?
Oh, so if you're using conference right now, it's just one presenter at a time. That is the difference. So if you're not using conference, then you can have the 2 or 4 up at the same time.
Okay, so with conference, there's only one at a time.
That functionality is actually coming soon.
Okay, so there you go, Phil. You got a scoop right there. They're adding the functionality for more than one. Is that just going to be a software update, or is that going to be something they have to pay for?
It's not paid for. It's a firmware update for our device, and it's very easy. Again, using our CMS, as these updates come available, you can decide to just push them out across your fleet of Screenbeams, and those features just become available. And it's really interesting too. Like with the multi-view and a lot of the other features, what we needed to do was to take out the human intervention for moderation. So all of that happens automatically as multiple devices join. The Screenbeam itself just moderates. It decides where to place it. It does the animation. It just eliminates the need to have that burdened host in the room trying to make everything work all the time.
Okay, so one last question, and we got to go. But we still have questions coming in here, so I want to make sure that those questions get to the Screenbeam team so that they can answer them after the session. But how does the presenter switching work for multiple people in the room? Is it first in, first out, or how do you, let's say I have control of the screen right now. I guess that you'd go into that enter the code mode, and the next person that enters the code would then have control of the screen, or how does that work, Parker?
So the default behavior is what we call single mode, and that's once I'm connected, nobody else can connect. You can't even see the Screenbeam when you go to try. I have to disconnect for the next person. On the non-conference, and as Mike kind of alluded to, coming soon, you have another mode called Quick Switch that you can choose, and that says if I'm connected and Mike is in the room with me and he wants to connect, all he does is Windows key K will overlay another code, and as my screen goes away, Mike's screen pops up.
Brandon had a quick question. Can we use it as a digital signage player as well?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Look, check them all out at screenbeam.com. We've been focusing on the 1100 Plus. By the way, what Screenbeam did was kind of interesting. The 1100 Plus had been out for a while, but then they did a firmware update and made it the 1100 Plus with conference. Basically made it a Screenbeam Conference, and didn't actually charge any more money for it. So if you have the 1100 Plus, you can actually just make sure you update the firmware, and boom, it's all of a sudden a conference product. If you want more information, go to screenbeam.com. Mike, Parker, you did a great job. Brandon, thanks for all the questions. Thanks to everyone for asking all those questions. Thanks to Madeline, Carrie, and everyone behind the scenes doing a great job today. And thanks for joining us for this Launch and Learn. We are out of here.